I think so many people are just moving through this world like they have their gallbladder taken out and they never hear what you're supposed to do now that that organ's gone. We believe that our health is within our control, and we want to equip you to grab the reins and thrive. We're all bio individuals. Everybody and every body is different. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to wellness. So we are here to help you fine-tune your personal approach to nutrient-dense diet, sleep, stress, digestion, blood sugar regulation, and all of the subcategories of these that we collectively call the foundations of wellness. This podcast is a megaphone to call in recruits who want to join us as we spread truth, revitalize hope, and reverse the trend of preventable poor health. This is Jamie Belz. Welcome to the Nutritional Therapy and Wellness podcast. Years ago, I was moving from Minnesota to Alaska, and I got halfway across Montana and had incredible pain under my right rib and my rib cage, under my rib cage on the right side. And so I stopped in a hotel, said, if it's not better by morning, I'll go see a doctor. I had to be on a ferry in Prince Rupert, British Columbia in a couple of days and ended up in the ER. The doctor said, you have to have your gallbladder out. So they took it out and I was on my way. Felt like I'd been beaten with a bag of bricks as I was crossing the Canadian Rockies. But I just trusted that that's what I needed to do. And so I had my gallbladder removed, and it wasn't until going through the NTP program, the Nutritional Therapy Practitioner program, where I realized that that gallbladder does something. And I had spent most of my 20s kind of bloated and unable to digest my fats. And having learned about supplementing bile salts post cholecystectomy was a major life changer, totally worth the tuition that I paid to go through the program in and of itself. I bought the website Gallbladder Girl and was bound and determined to change the world and tell people that there's another way. One, not everybody always has to get that gallbladder taken out. And two, it's a really important little organ that is completely underappreciated. And so today we're going to talk about the gallbladder. We're going to talk about what it does in the body and what you can do to optimize the wellness of your little gallbladder, or what to do if you, like me, have had your gallbladder taken out. And so joining me today, a fellow gallbladder guru, and I think I'll put you on a top tier above that because I went other directions with my practice. But Hallie Loy-Roby is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. She has a small practice in Southeast Michigan, working with clients who have had their gallbladders removed. In addition to supporting clients, she's on a mission to educate the masses that the gallbladder has a function and it serves a purpose, and without it, it can have a negative impact on the health of the body. As a lifelong learner, she has a strong commitment to continuous learning and staying up to date with the latest research and developments in the field of nutrition. She actively seeks opportunities to expand her knowledge and skills, recently becoming a functional supplement and quality specialist. Hallie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for having me today. I'm excited to talk about gallbladders with someone else that has this experience and knowledge and excitement, right? Like, save the gallbladders. I think we should make t-shirts.
I know. I call them the gallbladder snatchers. I'm like, oh, you got hit by the gallbladder snatchers too, huh? And it is this camaraderie that you find because I think so many people are just moving through this world like they have their gallbladder taken out and they never hear what you're supposed to do now that that organ's gone. Let's talk about, first of all, I want to talk about fats because the gallbladder is largely involved in the digestion of dietary fats. And so we'll talk more about the gallbladder and the organ that it is and its wonderment. So let's talk a little bit about fats first, Hallie.
So, my clients are always interested in learning a little bit more about fats. And I like to tell them that fats are not just energy sources, they're actually structural components that ensure the integrity and the flexibility and functionality of every cell in the body. And, without those adequate fats, and especially those healthy fats, that's really important that cell membranes become rigid and less effective in signaling. And overall just less capable of protecting the cell's internal environment, which, if you think about it, really does impact the overall health of cellular function. there's so many things that we can talk about fats, but when you think about why fats are so important, think about brain health and cognitive function. The brain's made up of what, like 60% fat, and fats like omega-3 fatty acids are important for brain development and also for that cognitive function, to help us reduce inflammation of the brain, which we all should be concerned about.
It,
Um,
and
oh, go
and
ahead.
I think it's it's really exciting to me that we have shifted that pendulum back. I mean, I'm not saying go straight keto, but there's there's a place for fat on the plate now. Whereas for several decades, due to misinformation in our science that was coming out, people became very fat phobic. And there was this major conflicting story that happened, and really sadly many people lost out on that energy, that, as you mentioned, the cell structure. Fats are really big for hormone production,
Mhm,
particularly cholesterol. Cholesterol is important, and we can synthesize up to 60% of the cholesterol in our body, not even bringing that in dietarily. That cholesterol has an important role. Our body's making it for a reason.
mhm,
Nutrient absorption of our fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. We're entering into the winter season, the dark time where that vitamin D, especially here in the Midwest, I'm in Minnesota, vitamin D is really hard to come by in those winter months. And we need fat to be able to properly absorb A, D, E, and K. And those vitamins, we won't go into that, but that's really important too. And I love what you said, especially the healthy fats. And we look at the unhealthy fats are going to be the ones that are Franken fats. Those are the ones that have been scientifically altered. Those are your hydrogenated fats. They're the things that are being boiled in fat, in the seed oils. But really, fat's very healthy. It's very needed, and it's really more about balance.
mhm,
Balancing the different types of fats when it comes to saturated, unsaturated, or polyunsaturated fats. It's really about balance versus, you know, the good people kind of talk about, like, oh, well, the saturated fats are the bad fats. No. The trans fats, those are the bad fats. And
mhm.
so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about fats. So we have these fats, we've got these dietary fats coming in, and then let's talk about where that gallbladder comes into play.
So, the gallbladder is a pear-shaped organ underneath the liver, and its function is starts really with the liver making the bile, and it sends it to the gallbladder to store and concentrate, which is really, really important. So when we eat a fatty meal, it's going to trigger CCK, which triggers the release of bile from the gallbladder, and that's where the magic starts to happen, if you will. So, I mentioned the bile storage, and I think of it kind of like a reservoir, if you will. And we want it to be concentrated because, as I mentioned, when we eat that fatty meal, it's going to be in the appropriate amounts, ideally. So if we don't eat as much fat, we don't need as much. And that's why, as Jamie mentioned earlier about like actually adding fat. It's okay to have fat on your plate because we do need it. It is so beneficial for not just the health of the body, but for the function of the body as well.
So this was first explained to me in the way of, the bile is basically the Dawn dish soap of the body, right? It helps to emulsify. It helps to break down those fats that you eat them. And so it's stored in the liver, or I'm sorry. So it's produced in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder, and then when the body senses the presence of dietary fats, it kind of squeezes that out. Like it's squeezing out that Dawn dish soap onto that fat to help break it down. But with what you're saying, so if you aren't eating fats, that gallbladder isn't going to be squeezing out that bile, and that becomes problematic over
Be-
time.
yeah. Sorry to interrupt you on that, but that's such a great point, right? So if the gallbladder kind of moves a little bit all the time, and if it's not being released, what can happen? It can become more viscous, so harder to pump out. and which is going to compromise that fat absorption. So it's important to get those fats in the meals just because of overall function of just the gallbladder in itself.
So what are some of the things if someone so if you're not eating fats, start eating fats. That's
Yes.
let's just start there because, it's such a bummer too because I grew up on a dairy farm. I mean, we grew up, like, having cases of butter. My dad would always help other farmers in the area, like, if the power went out, my dad had this big army generator that he would drag around to all the barns so that all the local farmers could milk their cows with the power being out, and they'd thank him. He would never take money, but they'd thank him by sending the milk truck up the driveway with a case of butter to be delivered, and so we literally had, like, 2 huge deep freezes growing up and always had a case, like a huge case of butter, and so I grew up eating fats, grew up on, a a farm diet, but then I remember becoming a teenager and hearing that fats are bad for you, and I remember eating, like, lemon heads and all of these gross things because they were advertised as fat-free, so I associated that with healthy.
Mhm.
And because of that, I wasn't exercising my gallbladder and I ended up with gallstones and I ended up having the gallbladder snatchers take that little gallbladder from me. And so what are some of the signs for, like, if somebody is having some gallbladder dysfunction, Haley, what are some of the signs that they're going to notice?
Well, I mean, as you experience like severe pain, you have that severe pain in the right side, bloating, so a lot of digestive discomfort, floating stools, which can indicate that the fats not being absorbed, even fat droplets in the toilet, belching oftentimes, maybe even some heartburn. Or change in bowel movements. It can switch from diarrhea to constipation, and just overall, just maybe some lack of energy, fatigue. Because remember, as mentioned, we need fat for energy. So, that those are just some signs that people can experience when their gallbladder might not be functioning as needed.
And you work largely with people who have already had a cholecystectomy, like, they've had their gallbladder taken out, and that's your niche, that's who you work with. Your
Mhm.
client base is largely that grouping, correct?
Correct. I mean, I do work with some that are just trying to support their gallbladder health, for multiple reasons, but yes, the majority of my clients do not have a gallbladder and, like, you weren't told that they needed to support it or even that it had a function, you know?
Mhm.
It wasn't a useless organ after all.
Yes, exactly, and that's another so with my Dawn dish soap analogy, um, I was told, so if you have a gallbladder and it's full of bile, so that can be squeezed and that emulsifier, that dish soap goes right to where it needs to go to help break down that fat, but if you don't have a gallbladder, your liver's still producing that bile, but it's just kind of, like, trickling out into your system, and it's not in a concentrated amount and it's really not doing a great job. And so, I talk about feeling like bloated and lethargic after having my gallbladder taken out because I didn't know that I needed to be supplementing with bile salts. What are some of the other things that people report struggling with after they've had their gallbladder taken out and they're not properly supporting their body after?
Uh, so brittle hair, brittle
Mm,
nails, and what else? Some people are experiencing, like, right after they eat a meal, having to run to the bathroom. Like, there's an urgency. They're like, I have breakfast and I have to be right next to a bathroom, or, you know, um, because it comes on so quickly, if you will. So, besides with the sometimes it's nausea, and I think that's just from the fats not digesting properly, causing some further dysfunction, but also like with the skin and or the excuse me, the hair and nails, it's you know, um, we're not getting the nutrients that we need. For me, I had my gallbladder removed in 2013. In 2017, I got hives. Now, I didn't know it at the time. It wasn't until I went to the program and I'm like, oh, I have to support my, this function that's no longer there. Right. And, and I do believe that the hives were a result of not having a gallbladder because of, I just wasn't absorbing nutrients, and then, just dysfunction started to happen. So, in my case, hives were an indication that something was going on.
And Haley, to circle back, so if you're not digesting those fats, going back to the start of this conversation, now we're going to have problems with our energy. We're going to have problems with all of the processes within the body that are dependent upon those fat soluble vitamins, the A, D, E, and K, and the cell structure, as you mentioned, which, furthermore, our inflammatory process and our anti-inflammatory processes, those are both heavily dependent upon fats in the body because we need those fats to produce the prostaglandins that we're not going to go down that. I remember when I first came out of NTP school and I love talking about the prostaglandins and I just watch people glaze over. It's really important though. We're supposed to be able to inflame and then bring that back again, right? To have that anti-inflammatory process. And that's all about having those healthy fats present.
Mhm.
And again, healthy fats just means good, clean fats that are balanced. We're not eating too many just saturated fats. We're not eating too much of any one kind. We're getting a variety. And
Mhm.
so, and then furthermore, that hormone production, that's really important too. And so this really is this vicious cycle. So if you're not getting the fats in the first place, that's problematic. If you're getting the fats in, but you're not digesting them, that's also problematic. And so, what are some of your favorite things as you speak on this, teach on this? What are some of the tidbits and things that we're going to do a quick tips episode too? That's going to come out in a couple of days. So hang tight for that as far as what you can do right here, right now to optimize the wellness of your gallbladder. But what are some of your favorite teaching points when it comes to gallbladder health, fats, having your gallbladder removed? Give us your what do most of your clients have aha moments after you mention?
Um, First off, eating fat on their foods. I'm like, you know what? I love vegetables and I love them all, right? But if I'm not getting the nutrients from it because I'm not putting that fat, like why bother, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
you know, they love that, but also staying hydrated. Now, that may not sound like something that would go hand in hand with this, but the liver needs to make that bile, and it has to be a certain viscosity. So if it's not, if it's too viscous, it's going to be harder. So hydration is just important for so many reasons, but also for gallbladder health. Stress reduction is another thing that is so important when it comes to gallbladder health, because we want to support overall digestion. Some may not think, but it's the gallbladder is kind of further, just a little bit south, in my perspective. So we need to make sure that we're supporting more northern functions of digestion. So that stress reduction impacting the HPA axis is going to be really, really
Mhm.
important. Another thing that clients are always a little resistant at first is supplementing with ox bile. And that's because we want to make sure that the fat is emulsified when we eat a fatty meal. So that was game changer for me. And I don't know if Jamie, if that was for you as
Yes.
well. And sometimes because we work on with the bio individual, so everyone's needs are a little different. So sometimes, in addition to ox bile, someone might need additional digestive enzymes to go along with that. But also just incorporating a nutrient dense diet, right? Just incorporate real food if you can, right? Um, and try to eliminate a little bit of that processed foods because that causes burden on the liver. We want it to work at high capacity and we don't want it to be sluggish. Um, and then when we think of like the nutrient dense diet, so leafy greens, um, so healthy fiber to keep things moving. But lastly, I'll say this: environmental toxins, because if the liver's impacted, so is the gallbladder. So just removing those toxins that you can be really beneficial. Since like removing those plug-in air fresheners. I used to have one in my car, and every time I think about it now, I was like, Haley, what did you do? Right? What were you doing to yourself? Um,
Yes.
and I'll mention this. I'll share a little this real quickly. Looking back now, I never realized anything in the moment. It wasn't until years later that I recognized that right before I had my gallbladder removed, I had a junker of a car, right? And it was putting exhaust fumes in that car as I drove. And now I think back and I'm like, wow, what impact did that have on my gallbladder removal? So,
So talk about that. Why is it that those toxins are so directly related to gallbladder health?
well, it comes into play with the liver, as I mentioned, but it's because the bile is that river to remove toxins from the body. And if it's not removed properly, bile gets recirculated reabsorbed and recirculated back into the body because it's that important. So, everything that we take in has to come out. And if it's being processed through the liver and not processed effectively, then it's more toxic, which causes more burden to the liver. It's that vicious circle, if you will.
And that's so true about so many cases with our wellness overall. It's kind of, you know, we look at many of these different areas where if you don't have this, then you don't have this, and you don't have this, which then brings you back to what you initially need to get that cycle going. And so, that's why we always talk about optimizing digestion. And part of optimizing digestion is to make sure that you're getting the right nutrients in. As you said, you're calming down and really getting into that parasympathetic mode when you're eating your foods, that your body's in a state of being able to properly digest and absorb. And there's another area I wanted to, I would love for you to talk about, like, for me, I was 19 years old and I have a white coat in front of me saying, if you don't get this taken out, this could happen and this could happen. And it was a really dire story and prognosis if I chose to not just have them take my gallbladder out. Talk a little bit about that because I feel like there's a whole lot of fear in this space, and some of it's legitimate. Some people do need to get their gallbladders taken out. They're at a point where it's crossed over into that space and that needs to happen. But can you speak to that gray area and talk to somebody who is maybe having some gallbladder issues? Maybe they've been told you might need to have this taken out, but they haven't quite gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that, and I think that that is a missing conversation. That yes, if you're going to the doctor and they're advising you to get your gallbladder removed because you're having pain, whatever the reason, you may have to get it removed, as Jamie mentioned, for various reasons, and that's okay, and that's a topic for another time. But in the meantime, do your research, understand how you can support it, kind of with what we just discussed earlier, like the proper hydration, eat a nutrient-dense diet. Recognize that your body can heal itself with the proper nutrients or tools, however you want to look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, a
Um,
nutrient sufficient body can do
yeah,
miraculous things.
absolutely. And it's okay to tell your doctor that, I just want to look into this. I need time to digest the information, if you will, and ask questions. Ask clarifying questions like, um, can you tell me more about the function of the gallbladder? I love that question, and I would love to hear what doctors have to say. But just be curious and be your own advocate.
Yeah.
Don't just lean into thinking that it has to be done. Now, if it's an emergency situation, like for me, it was an emergency situation, I really didn't have a choice. And I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to go ahead and provide it. I think the big conversation that needs to happen, and it's kind of where how I find myself in front of doctors saying, why don't you tell people that they need to support the lack of a gallbladder? Like, there is a function, it had a purpose. Why
Mhm.
can't we have that conversation? Why? So, like, educating people who don't have the gallbladder, right? That they do still need support. So, it's about being your own advocate in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
And asking those questions and doing your own research. There's plenty out there.
Yes.
and trust, and also trust that your body can heal itself with those nutrients. And don't give up hope, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just, again, I know I've already said it, but it's so important to be your own advocate. And, we have organs for a reason.
Yes. And
So
and
check it out.
and that's the thing, like, we weren't made with spare parts, but I feel like in the surgical world, everybody's got a scalpel sharpened and they're ready to start cutting on you, and my dad said a long time ago, "You're never the same after they've cut on you," and it's true, and sometimes
Mhm,
surgeries are necessary, absolutely, and I'm
mhm.
not just ragging on doctors, but I'll say this, what do you call a C average medical student? Doctor. They're not all created equally. They didn't all put in the time to study, and there are some really, really, really awesome doctors out there, but, like, in every single industry, we see this, and I'm just gonna throw this one out there. I think our police officers are amazing, amazing, amazing people, and I'm so thankful for our police officers, and there are a couple bad people. We've all worked on teams. You can't get 100% amazingly awesome people on every single team every time. But do not, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you've got a couple of bad apples in there. When it
Mhm.
comes to our doctors, if you start talking about looking for alternatives, if your doctor is pushing you to prescriptions or surgeries right out of the bat without looking at diet, lifestyle, or any alternative approaches before you get invasive, find a different doctor, shop around, ask somebody else, who do you go to? Call some places and see who you can find that is more functional thinking, holistically thinking, and those are the doctors that you want to go to. So don't be afraid just because you wrote somebody as your primary provider 7 years ago on a line somewhere. Don't just stick with that person. If it's not feeling right anymore, go find another one. Support the people who are doing it right. There are a lot of great doctors out there.
I just love that you said that, Jamie. I mean, it is so true, right? It's, you know, the earth provides us with what we need, and understand that sometimes, medical intervention is needed. But man, if you don't feel like it's right, if it doesn't resonate with you, if you're like,
Yes,
it's time
trust
to,
that intuition that's there for a reason.
yes. So, we need to trust the people on our teams. And again, there's a lot of good doctors out there.
Yes.
There's also but that shouldn't take away, how we feel, and wanting to live the best lives, or the healthiest life that we can live. And we know what's best for our body,
Yes.
right?
Yes, long before anybody else tells us that something's wrong, we're probably going to be able to say, "Hey, take a look at this." And it's the same thing with our kids. Who's gonna know when something's wrong with your child before you? Probably not somebody that just spent 30 seconds with them. So, Haley, I thank you so much for being here and talking on this. Is there anything else you wanna throw out there? We're gonna come back. We'll do that next episode that's going to give you some tips on how to approach fats in your diet and what you can do to love on that gallbladder and optimize your dietary fat digestion within your body. So anything else you want to add before we sign off on this one?
You know, yes, and it's only because I think it's so important, and it may not seem relevant to our conversation here, but I encourage everyone to find something that brings them joy and do it daily. It is so important for our overall health, so therefore it does impact the gallbladder. Thank you, Jamie, so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I just love being in your presence, and connecting with you is always a joy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you so much for joining us wherever you're listening from. Please reach out. Let us know. Let me know where you're at, what you're doing, what questions you have, topics you'd like me to cover. I am here for you to spread this knowledge. We're reversing the trend of preventable poor health, and I want you to be getting out of this everything that you want. So please hit subscribe. Give me some feedback, and I will look forward to chatting with you again next time on the Nutritional Therapy and Wellness podcast. Have a great rest of your day.